All right.
Okay. Start off with dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي يهديني ويسر حالي. Oh Allah, guide us and make it easy for us to follow your guidance. Okay, so I think in our last class we went over Abyssinia and the pilgrimage to or the hijrah to Abyssinia for some of the Muslims. Many of these Muslims in their clans did not have a good standing, or maybe their families disowned them, right? As we can relate, some people disown you if you take certain positions or whatever have you. Same in these clans, they disown some of their members, and they're all family, disown them, and so they don't have the protection. And so because they don't have that protection, they have to find, or they have to migrate, right? Because their life is in danger. So they migrate to Abyssinia, and we went over that and all the trials and tribulations within that. But I forgot to go over Surah Al-Najm. And Surah Al-Najm is called the Star, which is Surah 53 in the Quran. And it's a powerful surah, subhanAllah. Like if you just sit in a quiet place and you just read that surah, it'll probably have the same effect on you that it had on the companions and the people of Mecca when the Prophet ﷺ read it to them. And what he did was he got up on to the Kaaba and he recited this surah in its entirety to the crowd, and people just listened. And it was one of the only times where everybody was just listening. Nobody was even the most staunch, haters of the Prophet ﷺ were listening because of just how intense Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in this surah, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lays out everything from start to finish, right? Of his creation and why it is that the Prophet ﷺ should be listened to and should be, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one and only. And then at the end of the surah, there is a sajda. So if you were to read this surah during prayer, or sometimes during Taraweeh, people read the surah, and when they get to the end, they'll go straight down to sajda instead of making ruku and bowing. They'll go straight down to sajda and then come up and then make ruku and go through the motions. But you do that because at the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who submit and bow down, right? And as a sign of reverence, when we see that in the Quran, it's only certain areas where when we see that, wherever we are or whatever we're doing, we fall down in sajda, right? And so it had that effect on the crowd that was listening. And they were pagans, they were all sorts of people, there were some companions. But by the end of the surah, everybody fell down in sajda, except for one very stern, very stern very stern critic of the Prophet ﷺ. And what he did was he just like kind of bit down, picked up some dirt and like put it on his head and said, "That's enough for me." So it had that effect on people. It also had a point of contention that no scholar, or highest authoritative scholar um, has not taken this stance, but there are people and other scholars who have the stance of what's it called, the satanic verses. And so this is something that at least nowadays some Christians and people who are atheists and they'll combat Islam or talk against Islam, they'll bring up this satanic verses or whatever as a means to bash the religion, right? And it is in Surah An-Najm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the pagan gods, right? He mentions them by name, Alat, Al-Uzza, and the third. But he mentions them by name, and he, in our version of the surah, he has condemned people for worshiping them, right? But some will say that there was a addition added where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or with the Satan influenced the Prophet ﷺ to say some words in the heat of the moment and actually said something along the lines of you can worship both, right? Or you can worship Alat and or whatever. Like these are viable deities, right? And we know that not to be true as Muslims, right? So for us, is very straightforward that this is just a myth, a story. And you know, when you have large crowds of people, some hear what they want to hear, right? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 18 through 21-ish, he certainly saw the greatest of signs of the Lord. So have you considered Alat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third, and the other one? Is the male for you and for him the female? Then that is an unjust division, right? He mentions these pagan gods. I think one of the only times in the Quran we mentioned together, but people hear what they want to hear, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is saying that they would give. They say like these are the daughters of God, right? These idols or whatever, the daughters of God, like children of God or whatever. They give them and they name them daughters, but for themselves, they see daughters as an insult, right? And that's the culture. Like they don't see daughters as carrying the lineage, so they see them as a burden and an insult and a curse, kind of sort of when they have them. But they would attribute that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that misunderstanding to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even in their own context, they're not praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're still belittling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their own standards. But we reject this notion that there were satanic verses, and there's more than enough evidence to support that claim or that rejection. It's just that some reputable scholars had, and some of it is just documentation. Everybody wants to document. So some scholars, even Tamir, would document everything. It doesn't matter if it was right, wrong, false. Everything was documented. Everything was anything related to Al-Islam at the time, because he wanted that. And then whoever scholarly enough can go in and decipher what's real and what's not, right? So we have some of that, but then there are others that maybe for some reason or another fell into those rumors or whatever have you of this being the thing. and abrogated over time and sent out. Of course, we go with the majority opinion, which is that this did not happen, that this is a fabrication, right? Um, and it's known as very weak in the hadith as well. But when you get a lot of weak hadith together, sometimes people may consider them to be strong, just because it's a lot of different people saying it's one thing, but we most majority of all consider it as weak. And people who fight against Islam, they'll use that as their kind of weaponry or whatever. Yes.
I guess I can't quite understand. If it's in the Quran, it was stated, correct? I mean, it's something that the Prophet verbalized at that particular time.
What they're saying is that there were reports during that time that this was said, or this was added in, or whatever have you, like, or this is what I heard, right? And those are weak reports, but there were a good number of them. So some scholars who collect evidence and things like that, they'll take some weak reports and put it together and make it strong, or say there's something in it because it's a lot of people saying it or so. But then we have reputable, the core scholar Ibn Abbas, which says no, this didn't happen, that wasn't true, it's false or whatever happened. And so we go with the majority of the opinion, right? And it's not, can't prove that happened. We have the Quran and its originality of what is recited. There, it's not that they say that it was in the Quran, they're saying that at some point the shaitan influenced the prophet to speak in a way where he would not have otherwise, right? But it's, even to consider that, it's so many things that you have to also consider in context that you bring with it that just makes it impossible, really, when you look at the holistic view of how recitation or how the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam receives revelation and things. So it's really hearsay. But these are things that we should know about our seerah, so that when people bring it up, we're not blindsided, and we know how people manipulate certain things that happen, certain stories that come about, certain weak hadith that are around, how people manipulate that to get us confused about what our religion is and what's happened in history, right?
I guess it's not the Prophet, made a peace and blessing Allah from this line here, speaking to the crowds, and he's mentioning these so-called deity of the masses, you know, saying that how foolish you are to be called upon these so-called deities. I mean, would he not have said that to the crowd?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, this doesn't come up until like many years after the Prophet and the companions and things. This is not a point of contention during the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's time. It's not, it was understood.
But
right?
scholars after this.
Yes, by some after.
Mentioned this.
Some of the companions.
Yeah. Then he had to been influenced by a negative force.
Oh yeah.
But it seems logical to me.
Well, what's not logical is the fact that the shaitan doesn't have any power over people, right? He can whisper, he can make suggestions, but he doesn't have any power for them to actually say or make them say or do something. And that's what they're kind of insinuating, that the shaitan made him say this or that or whatever have you. And how the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam receives revelation, it comes from Jibril alayhi salam, and Jibril recites to him, and then he regurgitates what Jibril recites to him. So the shaitan in that connection, he shouldn't even be able to be in that sphere, right?
So maybe I'm holding on to this too much. It was just the issue of
it's the issue of hearsay.
Yeah.
Okay. After the fact, you know, people hear what they want to hear, they might say, oh, I heard Uzza and I heard Alat being recited, and they'll go take an inch and go a mile, right? It's more of that case, a scenario where they make things up to discourage or whatever have you. But all in all, this surah is beautiful. And even when people who were migrating to Abyssinia heard that this had happened, they thought, so rumor got as well, like word spreads and things aren't what they seem. They thought that it meant that all of Mecca had accepted Islam, right? When everybody bowed or whatever happened. But that wasn't the case. They were going to come back from Abyssinia and say, all right, we don't have to go down because everybody's come back or everybody's accepted Islam. It's all good, but that wasn't the case.
They were humbled by the words.
They were just humbled by the words and the message because it's sort of it's powerful, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really details out all of his creation, and then why don't you believe that this is all true and you can't debate it, right? Subhanallah. Okay, so for this week's class, we're going over the clans and the different clans and families, the allies and the enemies of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many allies and many enemies at this time, but it kind of splits up most of the families and the clans in a point of contention between the Quraysh. So we know that we have the scented ones, right? The Hashim tribe, and then we have the Confederates, Abu Dar, right? And Hashim was who again? Yeah, great grandfather. Yeah, great grandfather. But these tribes, they viewed Hashim as their leader, right? Their rightful leader. And the other tribes, the Confederates, viewed Abu Dar, Hashim's brother, as their rightful leader because he's the oldest, and the oldest usually by default becomes the leader. But Hashim was considered the most wise and worthy of leadership, so they split. And then you get multiple tribes out of these. You have the Hashim tribes, and then you have the Abu Dar tribes, right? And within these tribes are these clans. You have supporters and you have allies. So in the clan of Hashim, the Prophet ﷺ would often be depressed that many of his family members, close family members, relatives, were talking against him and weren't accepting the message. And then he had some support as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down guidance to him, saying in Al-Qasas, Surah 28, verse 56, you will never be able to guide all of those whom you love, though God guides whomever he wants, and he knows better who it is that accepts guidance, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reassuring the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides. During this time, we also talked about how Abu Lahab was redoing the marriages that were promised to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughter. He said that these marriages are off, right, and they're no more. It's a kind of a big slap in the face to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. But in place of that calling off of the marriage, Jamil's wealthy husband, Uthman ibn Affan, marries the Prophet's daughter, Ruqayya, and they have a beautiful marriage where the Prophet ﷺ says that God is beautiful and he loves beauty. Subhanallah. So you see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that bad situation and turns it and flips it around to an even better situation. MashaAllah. some pictures here I wanted to show. We can't because we don't have the projector. Hopefully I'll show them next class, and this will make more, you'll be able to see more of how this makes sense. But you have the clan of Mutalib, and it is the closest clan to Hashim, the Prophet Sallallahu clan. And they experienced the same success material-wise. And they have two very staunch supporters of the Prophet, Ubaidah ibn al-Harith and Mishta ibn Uthatha. This is Abu Bakr's relative. Mista is the one who spread rumors about Aisha, radiallahu anha, and then was later forgiven. And Ubaidah was murdered in a Battle of Badr, but he was a very staunch supporter from the start. Then we have the clan of Asad. This is Khadija's clan, the wife of the Prophet Sallallahu, her clan. And we have a few, about half the clan had accepted Islam early on, and then other half did not. Yeah, yes. So many people in her clan accepted, but about half and half. She couldn't get some of her half brother, Nawfal, to accept Islam, but his son embraced the Prophet Sallallahu and his message. So it's very interconnected, right? You don't align with the Prophet Sallallah's views, but your son or your daughter does, and your cousin do, right? So it's like everybody has some type of family connection to somebody, right? And it's kind of breaking up that family bond in a way, the toxic family bond, right? And cultural bond. In the clan of Zuhra, the Prophet's mother, Amina, this is her clan. They were a successful clan. Yes, so they had Abdul Rahman ibn Afaf and Sa'id ibn Abi Waqas. Rahman ibn Auf was in his 30s, and Waqas was a late teenager who joined the Prophet Sallallahu and embraced his message. Then we have the clan of Taim. Clan of Taim, they were a part of the Pact of Chivalry. This is something that Abu Bakr and Prophet Sallallahu attended when they were teenagers, the Pact of Chivalry, where they had agreed, most of the clans agreed that they would not cause oppression in the land. So Taim is Abu Bakr's, yes, Abu Bakr's clan. Taim is Abu Bakr's clan. Abu Bakr was one of the first companions, right? But his wife at that time took a little while to convert. So she did not right away, but eventually she did. And her children. But Abu Bakr had a son from a previous wife who did not convert until I think after the conquest of Mecca. So even, Abu Bakr can convince one of his sons to convert for some time. Okay. Then we have the plan of Mecca. Abu Jahl. This is Abu Jahl's clan. And Abu Jahl is one of the fiercest competitors of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Their clan is always in constant rivalry with Hisham. But many of Abu Jahl's, well, not many, yes, many of Abu Jahl's family embraced Islam. So you're seeing your cousins, he's the most fiercest. Like, this is the one who told the man to pick up the guts and put it on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam while he's praying, right? The camel guts. Like, this is the fiercest, and they're always in competition, right? But even his family members are converting, like his cousins are converting. His son, I think, converted as well. But yes, he's a source of a lot of pain for the early Muslims in Mecca. We have the clan of Sam. More powerful clan in Mecca. Notable allies like Amr ibn al-As, who he's the one who tried to get the Abyssinians, those who made Hijrah to Abyssinia, and try to get them out, right? Amr. He's a part of this clan. But another supporter, Hudayfa, who name is Hudayfa, who migrated to Abyssinia as a part of his clan as well. And he married Hafsa bin Omar. And that's important because he migrated to Abyssinia, he married Hafsa, but he died 1 year after the Battle of Badr. And that's what I told you, that the Prophet Sallallahu married Hafsa and took care of her as his fourth wife during that time. And that's the marriage that the king, the Negus at the time, had officiated for the Prophet Sallallahu in his absence, right? So in the Prophet Sallallahu absence, he officiated the wedding, and he made sure that he was the wali of Hafsa during that time. SubhanAllah. But many of the clan of the next clan is Amir, the clan of Amir. So most of everybody in that clan accepted Islam, except for the chief, Suhail, who was also a violent enemy of the Prophet Sallallahu but his own family, like almost all of his family converted, SubhanAllah. He also imprisoned his son. Yeah. His son, Abu Jandal, became Muslim early on, but he imprisoned him. And that was the case at the time. Sometimes when your sons or whatever, family members that you don't want to go out and be Muslim or whatever, or migrate to Medina, they would imprison them and keep them in chains. And so after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, he escaped eventually and joined the Muslims in Medina. All right. Then we have the clan of Abu Shams. Makhzum is kind of number one on the list. It's powerful, and Abu Shams is second to Makhzum. But a part of Abu Shams is Ubaydullah, who migrated to Abyssinia. And that's Habiba. Habiba was his wife. I made that mistake. So Hafsa, I guess, migrates back to Medina. But Habiba was the wife whom the Negus married to the Prophet. So that was his ninth wife, not his fourth. So Habiba was the wife that Ubaydullah passed away in Abyssinia, and the Negus officiated that wedding to Habiba for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that's a part of Abu Shams. This is also the clan of Hind, Abu Sufyan and Hind, who are staunch opponents of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We have clan of Adi. It's a lot of clans. So next class we'll have a lot of visualization, so you can actually put this together. But clan Adi, it was in decline for a few years on the lower side of the clans. They're Confederates, but a good number, about half of their clan joined Islam or joined the Prophet Sallallahu as early supporters in the Mecca era.
Early on, it took a lot of courage for them to make that commitment, be it a personal connection or be it economic connection. I mean, it just took a lot of strength and courage to make that declaration.
Yes, it did, definitely. And yeah, it wasn't easy. They were still kind of secretive, some, but those that were very staunch supporters weren't, and some paid the price for it. Others had, good protection or were just strong in general. So let's see. All right, so we have two more clans, and then we're going to get to one of those people, or one more. Two more. Clan of Jumu'ah, powerful clan, just like Makhzum. The chief Umayyah ibn Khalaf tortures his Abyssinian slave Bilal, right? That's Bilal's slave master. That he's a part of this clan. But Bilal subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bilal radiallahu anhu was able to kill him in the Battle of Badr. Right? He found him in the Battle of Badr and was able to seek his revenge and retaliation. And then we have our last Nawfal clan. So they have Abdul Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, who was one of the 10 companions, promised paradise, right? One of the greater companions of the Prophet Sallallahu in the clan of Nawfal, and Musaid ibn Umar, who prepared for the Prophet Sallallahu his way to make hijrah to Medina, and supported the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam until his death in the Battle of Uhud. Okay, so we see that there are a lot of rifts. Yeah, so we see that there's a lot of rifts, but one very notable conversion was the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's cousin slash brother-in-law slash, he has the most relations to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam than anybody else. He's his half brother. He is his brother-in-law. He is his cousin as well. Not his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law was Abdullah, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's father, right? And this is Hamza, right? We all hear about Hamza, strong, solid Hamza, right? Nobody messes with Hamza. He's top of the food chain, mashallah. And so, oftentimes the Prophet would make tawaf around the Kaaba by himself, and he would be heckled and ridiculed by Abu Jahl and those that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the not Mexico, the they were the Mustazin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them the Mustazin for making fun of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But they would do that like religiously. He would go around make tawaf and they'd just be heckling him and making fun of him and calling him names and things of that nature. At one point he got very upset and he said, "Oh, people of Quraysh, listen, I swear by Allah, whose hands is in my soul, and that you will one day be slaughtered to pieces." And then Abu Jahl says, "You can leave, Abdul Qasim, for you have never been foolish," kind of like saying it's a bluff or whatever have you from the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But then there was one time when they just went in on the Prophet so much that he didn't say anything, and he just went back home to his house, right? And this was the day that Hamza was coming into the city, and Hamza was told by somebody that what happened to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at this time. And Hamza and the Prophet have been together since childhood, right? They shared the same wet nurse, right? Amina, and they played together as children. So there's a good bond and relationship that they have together. So when Hamza comes in and he hears that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is being bullied, he hasn't talked to the Prophet. He hasn't said a word to him. He doesn't even know exactly what's going on. And he confronts Abu Jahl, and he says staunchly, like yelling at him, "Ah, you have been abusing Muhammad. I too follow his religion and profess what he preaches." So he's saying like, "Oh, you want to pick on him? All right, I'm doing it too. Now pick on me and see what happens." Right? This is the kind of attitude. So he follows and he accepts Islam without even speaking to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Just because he knows the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's character, he knows he's raised with him, he knows who he is. And if somebody's going to be against him, he knows that that's the wrong side to be on. And the right side to be on is with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But I wanted to ask everyone a question of why was Abu Jahl so bitter? Why, if Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wasn't going to make them any less richer by changing the trade routes or anything like that, it wasn't going to take away any shrines or anything or disrupt the trade and stuff. Why was he so or such a staunch hater of the Prophet?
It was because the Prophet, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, was getting status that was not acquired or acquired where they usually present their leaders. And so that was challenging the status quo as to how things are done.
Okay.
Yes, it was power.
Power?
Yes. The prophets, what the Prophet Sallallahu brought, didn't require a payment or obligation to him. You know, it was a freedom, really. He brought freedom.
Mm-hmm.
To all people, He was without a payment or bondage. It was power.
Yeah, those both go hand in hand in aspects.
But the death of Prophet make people's heart.
They can see that people were converting, and yeah, that's a part of it as well. I did not. Yeah, so all those together, like if you think about it, they create somebody who just naturally has to eventually come into a position of being a director, right, or a head of Mecca, right? And it can't be anybody else in their minds, right? If I had this status, if I'm this, leader, the top leader of the Quraysh, and he's just going to pass me and surpass me, and I can't do anything about it, right? If I accept the Prophet, I have to accept the fact that he's most fit to lead, or else I'd be a hypocrite. So why not just decline everything altogether, right? Why not just speak disfavorable about him, call him a liar, or whatever have you, and so that he is not given the leeway to seek this. So they're thinking 20, 10 years down the road where everybody's converting and nobody's like, who's going, if he is the Prophet, so who's going to debate whether or not he should be director or he should be the leader of the community as a whole, right? And so they're afraid of that. They're afraid of losing that power, like you said. They're afraid of not being in control, complete control, right? And giving that up to somebody, anybody that's not them. I guarantee you, if he said, all right, you can be the leader or you can be head of everything, they be the first ones to jump and support, right? But because of that pride that's ingrained in them, they cannot step outside of that. They can't imagine anybody else in that position except for them. It's always a fight to the most powerful. So we have Hamza, who now has embraced Islam and he can become a protector of the Prophet. But then we have Omar ibn al-Khattab, one of the famous Sahabi of the Prophet. And Amar's story is very It's very unique. It takes him a while. He actually is a very staunch opposer of the Prophet Sallallahu during the Prophet's time, and never actually really goes and speaks to the Prophet Sallallahu, but he always knows and hears how it's making rifts in the community, and Umar is more of a community type. Like he wants everything to be well and going well within families and community, right? He's born like that, and that's just the nature of the clans. And he saw the Prophet Sallallahu and his message as something that was breaking that up and changing that, and he had a deep hatred for that in his heart. But he was also a person that, like, he accepted truth, right? And he knew right from wrong, and he would kind of live that out in multiple ways during his pagan years of worship, right? But it was one instance where he was going to approach the prophet, and it was at night, and the prophet Sallallahu was praying at the Kaaba, and he was by himself, and he just had it in his mind that all right, this dude, like, he has to be a poet, like he has to be a soothsayer or whatever have you, and he's thinking these thoughts. And subhanAllah, the Prophet Sallallahu was in the middle of prayer, and he's reciting al-haqq, the reality is what it's called. And so the Prophet Sallallahu is reciting, and Umar is hearing these words live as he's walking towards the Prophet Sallallahu. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, so now I call to witness what you can see and also what you can't see, to demonstrate that this is truly the word of an honored messenger. These aren't the words of a mere poet. Oh, how little you believe. Neither are these the words of a fortune teller. Oh, how few reminders you take. And so in the moment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to Umar as he's approaching. Umar is thinking, what is he talking to me? Is he, what is this sorcery? Right? Like he's thinking in his head, all right, I'm gonna tell him he's a poet. And oh, I'm gonna tell him if he's not, he's a fortune teller or he's a soothsayer or whatever have you, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking directly to him through the Prophet Sallallahu in this verse, mashallah. And so he leaves, right? He's kind of spooked out, he leaves. But it gets to a point where Umar ibn al-Khattab is just fine with sacrificing his life. He says, all right, the only way that I'll be able to end this and bring unity to the Quraysh again, as we had before, is just to kill the Prophet Sallallahu. And so he gets his sword and he's adamant on going to the Prophet Sallallahu and just ending it. And he knows that it'll probably be his life as well that has to go. But he's willing to make that sacrifice for what he claims to be justice, right, or peace. But on his way, he is stopped by Nu'aym ibn Abdullah. And Nu'aym convinces Umar to first go look in his sister's family, who has secretly joined Islam. It's like something along the lines of you going to a prophet, so it's something with you don't even put your own family members in order, right? Like you're going to go to the prophet, so it's something, but you can't even handle your own family from converting to Islam. And Omar is thrown aback. He's like, what do you mean my own family? What do you mean my sister is this or that? And so he goes beeline straight to his sister's house. And when he gets there, he hears at the door them reciting Quran, right? He hears his sister and Sayyid ibn Zayd, her servant or her brother-in-law. He hears them reciting, and his sister Fatima. And so out of rage, right, because he's coming to kill the prophet, he still has this rage. Out of rage, he strikes his Saeed, his brother-in-law, and he also, out of rage, strikes his sister as well, like kind of like accidentally, like haphazardly, like his sister to the ground. But he has a moment where he sees his sister bleeding, and so that does something to his heart, right? And he pauses for a second, and he feels regret, and so that calms him down right out of this just rage. And then he acts, he helps her clean up, and asks, all right, read me some of what you were reading. Read me some of what he's given you to read. And a simple verse in Taha, she reads to him. Actually, she says first that no, you can't read it because you're not pure, right? You don't have wudu. And so he says, all right, well, teach me or show me how to do it or whatever have you. She does, and she reads to him in Surah Taha, I am God. There is no other God than I. So serve me alone and establish prayer so you can remember me. And she reads more of this to him. And by the time he's finished, his heart is completely changed. And so now he's on his way straight to the Prophet Prophet's house to give allegiance and to become Muslim, right? And so he gets to the Prophet Prophet's house, and he sees Hamza there, and Hamza's ready to defend the Prophet. He goes straight past Hamza and goes straight to the Prophet and embraces Islam and declares his wholehearted conversion to the faith. And when Umar and Hamza accept, things really change, because now you have people that are like the fiercest fighters, some of the fiercest fighters in Mecca, ready to defend and are very staunch and supporters of the cause and Islam, and very much so believe in what they have accepted. And so Amar's like, we're doing all this stuff in secret, but aren't we standing on the truth? So then why we have to be in secret anymore? And there's some crazy stories, some crazy stories of Amr. We got time for one story because it's 1:30, so we're going to end. But Amr, yeah, he said, I swear by Allah, we will leave our concealment and proclaim our nobility or our noble cause publicly. We then went to two groups, Hamza leading and the other headed to the mosque. Broad daylight, polytheists of the Quraysh saw us, their faces were pale and got incredibly depressed and resentful. On that very occasion, the Prophet attached to me the name of Al-Furuq, the one who can tell right from wrong. But there's one story where Hamza is, they're making they're migrating to Medina, and some are trying to do it in secret because they don't want to tip the Quraysh off because they'll kill them before they let them leave. Hamza, in his glory, and he goes up to the Kaaba and he says, "Oh, people of Quraysh, I am Hamza. I am Umar is Umar. I am Umar ibn al-Khattab. And I am an acceptor of Islam, right? I am an acceptor of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I am going to make a hijrah to Medina. And whoever wants their mother to lose a son can come and stop me. Whoever wants to make their mother a griever, somebody who grieves the loss of their son, can come and do something about it." Right? And nobody would touch Muhammad. Nobody would even dare come up to Ahmed because of his, strength and his power in that aspect. Okay, so we got through that. We're going to next week on Zoom. It's going to be on Zoom next week because we'll be at the retreat. Hopefully we can have enough signal to do it on Zoom. But we're going to be at the retreat, so we'll still do it on Zoom at this time next week, inshallah. But we'll be going over. So this is the 5th year. If you remember our chart, we'll be going. This is the final year before they make hijrah to Medina. And so we'll be going over these last attempts of reconciliation, the boycott, right? All these tribes in the Hashem are boycotting the Prophet Sallallahu tribe. So it becomes it's a very stressful time for the Prophet Sallallahu. But then we'll head into late Mecca. We're in early Mecca now. This is late Mecca, where the band and stuff is starting, and this year of sadness and things of that nature. So, inshallah. Any questions? Comments? If not, we can close out with prayer. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Okay, we're going to start the program for we're going to make Salat Dhuhr, and then we'll start the program for the Strongman School in the summer camp, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody online.